CJ the X was wrong. Or at least partly wrong. Back in February, he made a video called Skipping the First 5 Minutes of Tangled, which argues that... Hang on, I can't summarize a CJ the X video like this. Give me a sec. Salutations, motherfuckers! I have had a haircut, and the very camera that films me weeps at my beauty. Oh, look at that. Adonis himself just subscribed to my Patreon. A warthog is simply a peccary who has lost his job and sense of self-respect. Come on, Jeremy, comb your hair. My garbage lapel mic constrains my ability to do CJ-style gymnastics in the chair. My joints aren't 24 anymore, CJ. I am graceful and svelte. Leftist pandemic and plant moms were created in 1990 by Captain Planet, which taught kids that the worst imaginable villain was a corporatist named Loot and Plunder, and the true sign of a pure heart was a willingness to talk to animals. In his 2021 video essay, Skipping the First 5 Minutes of Tangled, CJ the X argues in essence that the first 5 minutes of Tangled makes the film objectively worse. That art can be objectively analyzed is one of the broader assertions of his channel, but in this case at least I think that he is slightly conflating objective analysis with formal analysis. For example, he enumerates the technical merits of this unaccountably gross combination of words and asserts that the line is technically competent, and then concludes it is therefore not objectively bad. And on the face of it, he's right. The presence of technical merit means that the line cannot be objectively without value. It does not, however, mean that the line is objectively good. The idea that technical merit outweighs the deep ickiness of the earfeel of this line is itself a subjective valuation. The first 5 minutes of Tangled is all backstory, narrated by Flynn Rider, explaining the magic flower, who Mother Gothel is, how the flower came to be made first into tea and then into a magic-haired baby, and how Mother Gothel whisked the baby away to a tower where she kept her hidden from the world. If you cut that first 5 minutes, CJ argues, you get a pretty great mystery where the characters and viewers are unraveling the secrets of the world together instead of getting an awkward eructation of knowledge up front. In sum, Tangled minus the first 5 minutes is more narratively effective as a mystery movie than the released cut of Tangled is as a children's story. Tangled is a pretty good kids movie. Angled is an engaging and artfully paced kids mystery. And on a formal level, I don't actually think he's wrong, but where he goes off track is here.
Anything that you could lose from skipping the first 5 minutes of the movie is gained by the power of its absence.
And this just isn't true. Rather, I think that the first 5 minutes of this movie provide some essential information that makes Tangled a much richer text, especially in the context of the specific thematic observations that CJ is making here. To be more specific, Tangled is a much less effective critique of the oppressive power of the state if you skip the first 5 minutes. Because CJ is 100% correct that both Tangled and Angled do fundamentally say fuck 12. But Tangled does a much better job of showing how deleterious the effects of invasive state power can be on individual human well-being, and much of that comes down to one of the big unanswered questions that CJ points out in the film. Part 1.
Who is this bitch?
The X asks this question at least 3 separate times and points out that Gothel is a better villain in Angled than she is in Tangled because her motivations are less empathetic.
In fact, removing the flower actually makes Gothel even less sympathetic than she theoretically was beforehand, because she kind of had that flower under a basket, didn't she, in the monologue before it was whisked away by the rich.
And while this might make her a better antagonist in the mystery that is Angled, it takes away some of the most essential part of her character. Question. Is Mother Gothel a villain? If she is, what are kids supposed to learn from that? If she's not, what are kids supposed to learn from that? Movies are about more than the stories they contain, and this is especially true of kids media like Tangled. Go watch any episode of Bluey and you'll see this clearly. The kids are playing in the park and the show sneaks in a lesson about how to make accommodations for someone with different physical needs. Or they're playing Baby Hospital and the show subtly teaches kids what to expect if a sibling is born premature. It's not necessarily what the story is about, but kids watching learn more than what is being said out loud. We'll likely explore this more in a future video, but education theorist John Dewey called this phenomenon collateral learning. He wrote, "Perhaps the greatest of all pedagogical fallacies is the notion that a person learns only the particular thing he is studying at the time." He was writing about classroom teaching, but it applies to kids media too. Angled Gothel is a villainous old woman who steals a baby from loving parents and keeps her imprisoned in a tower explicitly and exclusively to exploit her. We don't know why, except what we can infer from the text, which is that Rapunzel's hair keeps Gothel young and beautiful. She has no right to Rapunzel, no relationship with Rapunzel prior to the kidnapping, no particular relationship with the king or queen prior to the kidnapping, and nothing that the viewer is likely to perceive as authentic affection for Rapunzel. Like straight up peak evil witch behavior. She has purloined this child and is just draining the life from her, a la Winifred Sanderson. Just a mean old teen eater. But here's the thing. Tangled Gothel is a much more interesting, complex, and human character than Angled Gothel, because those first 5 minutes fundamentally change the relationship between Gothel and Rapunzel. I'm going to argue that the first 5 minutes should in some ways redeem Gothel, both as an antagonist and as a mother, and that they also open the film to be read as a critique not only of the police state, but of exploitation colonialism. But let's be clear, Gothel is definitely an abuser. After I've laid out my defense of Gothel, Mom Nuke will be here to look at how the first 5 minutes of Tangled can help us better understand the drives, dynamics, and dysfunctions of Gothel as a mother. Part 2. The first 5 minutes. Before we dig into the specifics we get in the introduction, I want to make something extremely explicit. Eugene Fitzherbert is a state agent. Flynn Rider might have been cool once, but by the time he is narrating this story, he is the king's son-in-law and presumptive consort of the eventual Queen of Corona. He is a shill, and he's about to vomit forth for us the official story, the story that you might hear from the tour guide at the museum at the base of Rapunzel's tower. As such, the story that he's about to tell us is full of both obvious lies, in that there's a clear disconnect between what Flynn says and what's shown on screen at the time, but he's also not a very good propagandist, which means we'll also hear Flynn reveal some things that the royal family would probably prefer us not to hear. So, lights up on Flynn Rider's snitch face on a wanted poster. He tells us that a drop of sunlight fell to the earth and grew into a magic healing flower, which Gothel seems to find immediately. Over centuries, the kingdom of Corona develops a hop, skip, and a boat ride away. The queen is pregnant, but on the brink of death, so the king sends people out to find the healing flower. Gothel has been hoarding the flower to herself for hundreds of years, using the song to invoke its magic. Flynn calls this creepy.
She sings to it, she turns young. Creepy, right?
Two Corona soldiers find the flower and dig it up with nothing but their hands. King makes magic tea, Queen extrudes magic baby, lanterns, etc. Gothel shows up, sings the song to Baby Haircut, and takes a lock of her hair, but the magic doesn't work. Flynn says she
broke into the castle, stole the child,
and raised it as her own.
But this time, she was determined to keep it hidden.
We see Gothel explain to Baby Haircut that
the outside world is a dangerous place, filled with horrible, selfish people.
That's what Flynn Turncoat tells us, and what CJ would have us ignore. So let's dig into these lists, shall we? Part 3. The first verse.
Flower, gleam, and glow.
Let's start at the beginning. Literally the instant that Flower is born, Gothel is there. It is a freakish and honestly contrived feeling coincidence, but look, there she is, the very moment Flower pops out of the ground. And then, awkward truth number 2, centuries pass. Hundreds of years. More than 100 of years. Allow me to take you on a brief tour of my backyard. These are the flowers that Mom Nuke and I planted back in March. They are all bad. These flowers are dead. We have not succeeded at keeping these flowers alive for even a 10 of months. Part of the reason why is this matched set of idiots who cannot distinguish between flowers and furniture. But these dead flowers are in an enclosed yard in an extremely fertile part of the world. They have 2 reasonably functional adults to tend to them, and they only have 3 small 4-legged ding-dogs to contend with. Mother Gothel's flower is just sitting out there in the middle of the damn woods with who knows how many animals tromping around the place, and she manages to keep this flower alive for several hundred years. Time enough for the kingdom of Corona to grow from the bare wilderness of this island to the haphazardly managed monarchy we see before us. That is how long Mother Gothel has cared for this flower. Now, you might reasonably say at this point, well, this flower is magic. Why should we presume that it should require any care at all? Because if we dip back into our bag of inconvenient admissions, we note that these 2 cops are able to dig up flower with nothing but their bare hands. They don't even try hard, they just lift it out of the ground. This flower has no magical protection. The figurative pigs do nothing that couldn't have been done by any literal pig to wander by with a passing interest in tubers. This flower could not have survived for centuries without having a passionate, caring, and attentive plant mom to care for it. And what's this?
This woman, Mother Gothel.
Oh, neat. Flynn calls the old woman Mother Gothel, but she doesn't seem to have any kids. Later on, Rapunzel will call her mom, but from Flynn's point of view as monarchy stooge, she is not Rapunzel's mom. So whose mother is Mother Gothel? Flowers, that's who. Flower is not a person, but Flower and Mother Gothel share a centuries-long relationship of interdependent caretaking. We'll make more of this in a minute, but for now it's worth observing that while Angled Gothel is just a mysterious baby thief, Tangled Gothel has literally hundreds of years of love and care driving her.
Let your power shine.
Let's talk about the song, yeah? The song is interesting. It's interesting because it's mysterious, as CJ points out.
You could say that in the voiceover part, we see Gothel singing the song that activates the magic flower power, which explains how Rapunzel knows the song. But how does Gothel know the song?
It's also interesting because, again, as CJ points out, that's not the only way that the flower magic seems to work. At the end of the movie, Princess Brunette Von Pixiecut squeezes out a tear because her narc boyfriend has died, and he comes back to life. I feel like there are two possible interpretations here. Number one is that Rapunzel's bodily fluids are intrinsically magic, a la Steven Universe, which, let's say, I don't feel as strongly supported by the text. Interpretation 2, though, is reasonable and very in line with Disney's superficial heart of a child moon logic. It's love. Big Pun loves this adorable little class traitor. She loves him so hard that he comes right the hell back to life. Aside, how messed up is it that in the last few hours, Rapunzel has figured out that she was kidnapped as a baby, that her mom isn't her mom, that she has loving parents who believed her lost for the last 18 years, and that she's a princess. She's been attacked, chained, and gagged by her mother, watched her mother lure her rat boyfriend up to the tower and stab him in the back, tried to save him, only to have him sacrifice himself by also destroying the most essential part of her identity, watched her own mother wither and decay, watched her horse-sucking pet lizard murder her mother with her own hair, and watched said rat boyfriend die in her arms, and then in desperation finally managed to bring his ass back to life. And his response to all of this is to tell her about his kink.
Did I ever tell you I've got a thing for brunettes?
Can I just... Men are absolute trash. So, anyway, it's not the song, it's the love, which, interesting, because that also offers some explanation for how A, Plant Mom Gothel might have managed to extend her life in the however many years before she learned the song, and B, where the song might have come from. As you have seen, I am real bad at plants, but I sing to my dogs all the time. I used to sing to Mom Nuke's roommates' cats. I sing dumb songs to my kids. Plant Mom Gothel took care of this flower for hundreds of years. Maybe as she took care of it, she sang to it. And maybe as she sang to it, it took care of her. And maybe that's all that the song is. A little memory of centuries of love. The song had to come from somewhere, but the magic's not in the song. The magic's in the love. And the love was there for hundreds of years before the chuckleheads of Corona put one rock on top of another. And that, I think, is why we get that kinda gross line from Flynn.
She sings to which he turns young. Creepy, right?
Because think about that for a second. If you didn't have Eugene's Fink voice in your head telling you that, would it cross your mind? If you went to the dentist and you happened to walk in just as the receptionist was watering the monstera in the waiting room, and you caught her singing a little plant watering song, would you think, oh, what a creep? Would you assume she was a villainess? Flynn says it's creepy because he doesn't want us to think the obvious thing. It's kind of sweet, actually. She's a plant mom. That's nice.
Make the clock reverse.
Let me take a minute and swing back real quick to why we're talking about this. We are arguing that the first 5 minutes of Tangled enrich and enhance the anti-establishment themes that CJ the X points out in the film by changing the way we understand the relationship between Rapunzel and Gothel, and that part of the way that happens is in the obvious inconsistencies between the official story as Flynn recounts it and the actual evidence presented on screen. Flynn tells two overt lies and makes one clearly misleading statement with the intent of making Gothel out as a villain, despite the fact that, at least for the centuries preceding the events of the film, she very clearly is not. So overt lie number 1 was that singing to plants is creepy, which it just obviously isn't. Here's overt lie number 2. Gothel hoarded the plant. Like, okay. The evidence that we have for this is what? That she put a basket on it? A basket. We know that this woman is somehow capable of building a stone tower somewhere on the order of 15 stories tall. We know that it takes literally zero effort to transplant this flower. It's not root-bound, the earth isn't tightly packed, it just plorps right up. If Gothel were hoarding this plant to herself, wouldn't she have taken literally any action to secure it? She puts a basket on the damn thing so loosely that it falls off when her lantern bumps into it. This basket would not protect Flower from a cat. Here's another thing we know. The cops know what they're looking for. When they find Flower, they say, "We found it." Now, I don't want to get too tinfoil on y'all here, but the only reason anyone has ever shouted, "We found it," is because they were looking for something specific. They don't say, "We found something," or "Oh shit, a glowing flower," or "Why is this basket here? What good is that going to do anybody?" They say, "We found it," which means they knew there was a magic healing flower out there somewhere, which means that Gothel wasn't hoarding the flower. For the cops to know about the flower, somebody else has to know about the flower. And for somebody else to know about the flower, Gothel has to have told somebody about the flower. Or else somebody else found it and has been using it independently. But either way, "we found it" is incompatible with Gothel was hoarding the flower to herself. And even if you don't buy that, it's unquestionably true that Gothel used the flower in a way that didn't use it up or in any way prevent others from using it. I mean, except, I don't know, snails who couldn't lift her high security wire basket. But you know who did keep the flower to herself? The queen is who. Gothel finds a flower and keeps it alive for hundreds of years just so that she can sing her little song to it from time to time. And then the Corona cops bumble in, dig it up, and make tea with it. Gothel's use of the flower did not consume it. The kingdom of Coronas did.
Bring back what once was mine.
And here's the last, most essential thing that we learn from the first 5 minutes of Tangled. The flower did not belong to the king. Gothel and Flower are hanging out together for hundreds of years before Corona sprouts up a hop, skip, and a boat ride away. The borders are unclear and we never see a map, but even Flinifest Destiny Rider is extremely clear that this flower is a fair distance away from the kingdom. And remind me, is there a word for when a foreign government sends armed state agents outside of its borders to seize the resources of an indigenous population and ship them home to the benefit of the ruling class and the exclusion of everyone else? I feel like there maybe is. So the question then is this. Is Rapunzel a
stolen-ass baby?
Or is she a reclaimed-ass baby? Did Gothel kidnap a child, or did she simply bring back what once was hers? In the original Brothers Grimm version of the story, the baby is named Rapunzel because that's the name of the salad green that her dad stole from the sorceress's walled garden to keep his wife alive. Think arugula. The sorceress says, sure, you can have my arugula if I can have the baby. And then she names the baby arugula. The baby is the plant, and the plant is the baby. And when CJ says that in Angled,
the flower does not exist because after the opening monologue, the flower never comes up again.
He's just extremely wrong, because it comes up again all the time. Almost every time Gothel addresses Rapunzel, she calls her Flower.
See you in a bit, my flower.
Rapunzel is Flower is Rapunzel. Gothel doesn't want to steal an ass baby. She wants to recover what was hers, the magic that keeps her alive, and the flower that she's loved for 1,000 years. And we know this in part because at first she simply tries to take a lock of Rapunzel's obviously magical hair. It's only when that fails that Gothel has to take the whole child. So let's sum this up. A woman tends a flower for centuries. They keep each other alive. They develop rapport. They care for one another. She keeps it safe, but she does not keep it secret. A foreign government sends military forces on a resource gathering expedition outside of their borders. They steal the flower and give it over to the exclusive use of the ruling elite, who consume it, or at least transform it completely. Without it, she will die. She attempts to recover the resource without harming anyone, and only when that fails does she forcibly take back what once was hers. So let's say it clearly. Rapunzel is not and was never a stolen-ass baby. She's a repatriated-ass baby. And is it any wonder then that Gothel says this to Flower?
The outside world is a dangerous place, filled with horrible, selfish people.
She's not wrong. Flynn implies that she's keeping her hidden out of her own avarice for Rapunzel's power, but Gothel is objectively, empirically correct that there are people who will take and destroy Flower in order to exploit her, because her birth parents have already done so. The incantation in Tangled has 2 verses, and the first is directly addressed to the flower. Flower, gleam and glow, let your power shine, make the clock reverse, bring back what once was mine. It's easy to read this as an elegy for the flower, which it is. It's not just Gothel's youth that has been lost, it's her pre-colonial past. It's Gothel telling her flower, I wish we could have what was taken from us, be what we once were. But of course, that's not possible. It has been impossible since the colonists first wrenched flower from the earth with their grasping claws. So it is here at the second verse that we'll turn to what these first 5 minutes of the film should do to the way we think and feel about Gothel as a mother, the role she has been cast into so powerfully that it has become her name. Part 4, the second verse.
So Gothel becomes mother to Rapunzel anyway, by accident. When she breaks into the castle, her goal isn't to take the baby. She thinks a lock of hair will be enough. And it's only when that clearly doesn't work that she grabs the whole ass baby and jumps out the window. There isn't enough time between the haircut and the swooping for Gothel to decide if she wants to parent this baby. And even if there had been, the choice is pretty easy to make. Raise this baby or die. I bring this up because despite the circumstances that bring them together, Gothel seems to make an effort to be a good parent to Rapunzel. In the song When Will My Life Begin, Rapunzel shares her daily schedule, which includes reading books, playing musical instruments, doing various handicrafts, decorating, getting physical exercise. All of these activities require both instruction and materials that Gothel would have had to provide to her daughter. The paint, for example, requires a 3 days journey to get. Gothel both knows and takes great pains to get the ingredients ingredients for Rapunzel's favorite food, which is hazelnut soup. Perhaps most tellingly, Rapunzel knows what birthdays are and that she has one, and Gothel even provides Rapunzel with a requested gift for her birthday. Gothel clearly cares about Rapunzel's upbringing and takes seriously her responsibility to provide a safe, happy life. Gothel's care for Rapunzel suggests that, at the very least, it matters to Gothel that Rapunzel's life in the tower is comfortable and enriched. And Rapunzel calls Gothel mother because Gothel is a mother to her, which she really didn't have to be. But despite all that, Gothel is still an abuser. Even if we take the kidnapping out of the equation, Gothel's relationship with Rapunzel reveals some pretty glaring flaws. Gothel is unable to take responsibility for her mistakes and actions, casting their arguments as fundamentally Rapunzel's fault. She constantly insults Rapunzel, calling her naive, defenseless, poorly dressed, stupid, and ugly. When Rapunzel works up the courage to have a serious conversation with her mother about her desires and feelings, Gothel makes her feel guilty for even bringing it up, as though desiring adventure and independence is selfish. I'm not qualified to comment on anyone's mental health, but from where I'm sitting, Gothel's a straight up narcissist. And this is reflected, hey-oh, by the desire that more than anything animates and motivates Gothel. She wants to be young and beautiful. While it's true that Gothel's life is sustained unnaturally by Flower and later Rapunzel, Gothel's focus seems equally to be on maintaining her own beauty. Another way to read Flynn's creepy comment in the first 5 minutes is that it's Gothel's desire to be young and beautiful forever that's creepy, which... is it? Flynn Rydashian's first utterance in this story, chronologically speaking, reflects his own desire to be portrayed more flatteringly in his wanted poster.
They just can't get my nose right.
Gothel doesn't want anything from Flower that every oil of Olay product hasn't been trying to sell me since I was old enough to read magazines. If Gothel wants to be young and beautiful forever, it's not creepy that she does. It's literal ad copy.
Change the fate's design.
The X mentions briefly that Tangled is the spiritual ancestor of Frozen, and that's interesting because in Elsa, Magical Princess, we get to see what feels like a very realistic depiction of how royal parents would handle a powerful daughter. And to make a long story short, the answer is poorly. The King and Queen of Arendelle are in the same situation that the King and Queen of Corona would be if Mother Gothel had decided to go gently into the good night, and they respond with some deeply problematic parenting. For one thing, they're really afraid of Elsa and how her abilities hurt others. Her magic isn't something that they value. It terrifies them. The fear is of loss. The specific thing they're afraid of is that Elsa's magic will cost them Anna. And while Rapunzel's magic is healing magic that has already saved her mother's life, it seems extremely believable that her parents would also be afraid of losing their daughter. It's not unreasonable. She's a commodity. Elsa's parents train her to hide her magic and suppress her own feelings, to keep her abilities secret by concealing them. Would it be too on the nose to say that they teach her to hide her light under a basket? Out of fear, they separate Elsa from everyone else on Earth, including her sister. She lives a life of pure isolation, with no apparent contact with anyone. Is Elsa's life in Arendelle as rich as Rapunzel's in her liberal arts college of a tower? It's hard to say. It isn't until Elsa's parents die that we see the tragedy they've created, the deep schism between their daughters, and the deeper one in Elsa's psyche. They haven't raised an adult. They've raised a holstered weapon, and one who is completely unable to function once she's exposed to the real world. We don't get the chance to see how the King and Queen of Corona would parent Rapunzel, but I find it hard to believe they'd do a much better job.
In fact, hold on. Can we just take a minute to observe just how categorically shit her birth parents would have been at even the basic task of keeping her safe? Because, oh my god, these cops are useless. In the first 5 minutes of Tangled, as we have seen, an old woman is able to climb onto the King and Queen's balcony. The initial breach of security is caused by the wind. Gothel is able to literally walk into the King and Queen's bedroom, where she sings a song to their newborn baby without anyone noticing. As she is leaving the room, the King and Queen both witness her leaving with the baby. No guards are visible at any point during this operation. The old woman is then able to climb down the castle and escape the island without being apprehended or apparently even noticed. In the third 5 minutes of Tangled, we learn that 2 ambulatory bags of cement and a lanky dweeb with delusions of grandeur were also able to break into the castle without apparent difficulty. They stole the princess's crown, a diadem of such great price that it is explicitly stated that Flynn could buy a castle with his 1/3 share.
We do this job. You can buy your own castle.
And they leave without being apprehended. And the most powerful asset the Kingdom of Corona can muster to pursue them is a horse. At the climax of the movie, Flynn has been arrested, and let's note here that literally the only way for anyone to get arrested in this kingdom is to have them gagged, tied to a boat with incontrovertible evidence of their crimes, and physically delivered into police custody. Despite all this gift wrapping, no fewer than 20 armed thugs are able to break into the castle and stage a preposterously elaborate jailbreak, which the cops are powerless to influence in any way. No pursuit is fielded because the horse has turned outlaw.
Which is to say, while we may object in principle to Gothel's approach to keeping Rapunzel safe, it seems likely that her birth parents wouldn't have done much better. It's not hard for me to imagine the king and queen sequestering Rapunzel, preventing her from dating or even becoming friends with anyone, lest the kingdom discover her obviously magical hair. Best case scenario, she ends up being clumsily seduced by a jumping mouse in a bad toupee. Worst case scenario, I guess, is that Flynn kidnaps her and the movie plays out more or less the same way.
Save what has been lost.
In a fundamental way then, Gothel's not wrong. The world is a dangerous place for Rapunzel. But the ways that Gothel tries to preserve and protect Rapunzel reveal more about Gothel's own limitations than they do about the real dangers that surround them. Because I think part of what we're seeing is Gothel wrestling with the somewhat obvious truth that a teenage girl is a fundamentally different kind of thing than a magic plant. And in Mother Knows Best, Gothel starts to explain by immediately forgetting that difference.
Look at you, as fragile as a flower.
The reasons she provides to explain why Rapunzel isn't safe in the real world move from the real. Again, ruffians and thugs literally will break into this tower and have already broken into Corona Castle, to the absurdly silly men with pointy teeth. Gothel is equally parts protective and jealous, both earnestly desiring to keep Rapunzel safe from real danger and selfishly wanting to keep Rapunzel under her own control. Even in what CJ calls Mother Knows Best derogatory reprise, Gothel is still being both manipulative and honest.
Rapunzel knows best. Rapunzel's so mature now. Such a clever grown-up miss.
On the one hand, Gothel is being controlling and deceptive and generally skeezy. On the other, Rapunzel is young and naive and putting a lot of trust in a guy whose motives are extremely suspect. And let me tell you, for my money, there is nothing more essential to the experience of being a parent than watching your kid do something deeply stupid. There's no winning there. If things go bad the way you expect they will, well, you have to pick up the pieces. And if, God forbid, the dumb kid idea pays off, then you get a small flare of pride at their independence, which is quickly overwhelmed by the unfathomable smugness with which they will strut around and inform you that they will never listen to you again, thank you very much, and the knowledge that the smugness will also mean their next harebrained scheme will likely be much more catastrophic. Gothel is trying to say the things she thinks will make Rapunzel do what she wants, and that's largely because of her earnest belief that Mother does, in fact, know best. Moms usually do. But at no point is Gothel honest in the way that teenagers in particular need honesty from their parents. She's not willing to tell the truth about why Rapunzel's so vulnerable. She's not willing to share the truth about her own vulnerability, mortality, and fear. She doesn't know how to treat Rapunzel as a daughter because she didn't sign up for a daughter. She signed up for a flower. Gothel wasn't emotionally equipped to be a parent, but people who are not emotionally equipped to be parents become parents all the time. And some of their children watch Disney movies. There is value in saying to those of us who did that while we might have deserved better, our parents are humans with blind spots and shortcomings and pain, not monsters we can and should defenestrate.
Bring back what once was mine.
Lindsay Ellis calls Mother Gothel maybe the last of the evil Disney villains, but we think Gothel is better understood as a transitional villain in the evolution of Disney storytelling. Like Anton Ego, Charles Muntz, and Dr. Facilier before her, she gets a villain's end, but her tragic, complex life and backstory have more in common with Robert Callahan, Tekka, and Namari, all of whom are acknowledged in their humanity and allowed to some degree to heal as part of the narrative. Gothel is flawed, absolutely, but she's not this bitch. At this point, I hope you'll agree, she's not even the bad guy, not really. This is really an everyone except Rapunzel sucks here situation. Until, well...
You want me to be the bad guy? Fine. Now I'm the bad guy.
If Tangled fails, it fails here. In this moment, the text has a choice. Gothel could finally level with her daughter, be honest, let Rapunzel into the truth that has brought them both to this moment, or not. Choosing not here allows the movie to wave away the complicated questions at the heart of the first 5 minutes. How do we heal harms that cannot easily be undone? Can we save what has been lost? Because if Gothel is the bad guy, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if her relationship with Flower predates the kingdom of Corona. It doesn't matter that the Kingsguard invaded a foreign territory to uproot and destroy something that did not belong to them. It doesn't matter that their carelessness nearly ended a relationship centuries in the making and sentenced an old, otherwise powerless woman to death. All of this backstory can, with this single exclamation, simply be waved away. Gothel is the bad guy. Let the cute gecko yeet her out the window and get on to the wedding already. I hear what you're thinking. This is exactly the X's point. And you're right. But we want to honor CJ's larger point that children are smart and they can figure things out. What they figure out in Angled is that this bitch is bad and that Rapunzel and Flynn and the king and the kingdom are good. The universe is neat and tidy. But imagine a movie where Gothel doesn't proclaim herself the bad guy. Imagine instead that she reconnects in this moment of almost cliche mother-teen tension with her own humanity. Imagine that instead of watching the last drops of compassion and love drain from her face, we see it overtaken by them. Gothel tells Rapunzel at last what the danger is, both to herself and to Rapunzel. This would give Rapunzel the thing she's wanted most in the world, to be an adult. This is the reality outside of childhood. Sometimes there are no good choices. Sometimes the world is fucked up and awful, and it happened before you were born, and it wasn't even about you, and yet you've inherited it, and you have to decide what to do next. Here you go, Arugula. Your real life has begun. And it's not romping in taverns or going to nationalistic pyrotechnics displays. It's wading hip deep in garbage you didn't make, trying to solve problems that are bigger than you will ever be, even if you were a literal princess. I don't know what Rapunzel would do, faced with this information and this choice. And I suspect we get the movie that we do because no one involved in the film's creation could imagine it either. Rapunzel wouldn't knowingly abandon the woman who raised her, who loved her even in her way, to wither and die. But there's also no way for her to live a healthy, full life inside the tower. Gothel can never have Flower back. The king and queen will never get to raise their daughter. Rapunzel will never get to grow up as the princess of Corona. There's no tidy justice here for anyone. What was lost cannot be regained. That's what real loss is.
Part 5. A brief foray into Waffles.
Last week, Kid Nuke broke my waffle maker. He didn't mean to do it. He wasn't trying to hurt anything. But in a bout of 6-year-old careless exuberance, his limbs tangled up with the cord and pulled the waffle maker down from the countertop onto the floor, where it promptly cracked in two. I should explain here that my waffle maker is special to me. It's ancient, having been my father's before it was mine. At some point, he replaced the original power cord with a longer one he salvaged from an old vacuum, and that made it really handy in the weirdly designed kitchens I had in my college apartments. I've used it hundreds of times to feed the people I love. And before that, my dad used it to feed me. It makes the best, crispiest, lightest, most delicious waffles I've ever eaten, such that I pretty much never order them in restaurants. I've had other, newer, fancier waffle makers, but never have I found one as reliable, as well-designed, as perfect. And now it's broken. It might still be functional and we might be able to glue its ceramic body back together, but the break cannot be undone. My rational brain knows that a waffle iron is not worth crying over, but my heart is also a little broken. Once he realized what had happened to the waffle maker, Kid Nuke ran to me and hugged me. He knew, from the look on my face and the tightness in my body, that I was already grieving. He took responsibility for his carelessness, and he apologized. And the mom part of my brain that was watching this noticed that. Kid Nuke has always been a whirlwind of a person. He's broken many things. But he's learning, I think, that even when we hurt someone or something by accident, it still hurts, and we're still responsible. Many of us have never been given the space to learn that. We're told that things aren't our fault, that we don't need to be sorry or make amends, that what matters in the world is not our actions or the harms they bring, but our intentions. If you weren't trying to hurt anyone or break anything, it doesn't matter that you did, but it does. When the Kingdom of Corona's guards uprooted and consumed Flower, they weren't trying to hurt Gothel. They were trying to save their queen. When Gothel stole Rapunzel, she didn't do it out of revenge or hatred. She was trying to save her own life and to protect what remained of her beloved Flower. Rapunzel, at the end of the first 5 minutes of Tangled, is the tension between these two opposing hurts. Her existence isn't the product of anyone's evil intent, but both she and the pain exist anyway. As parents of small children, we're very aware that no matter matter what we do, Kid Nuke and Baby Nuke's adulthood will force them to grapple with several overlapping apocalypses. Their universe will not be neat and tidy. It will be messier and probably more tragic than ours is now. Our kids don't need to learn how to spot the bad guy. They need to learn how to grieve beautiful things they can't keep, how to reconcile hurts they didn't make, and how to love themselves and others as full, worthy, flawed humans. You can't fight climate change or colonialism or heal your trauma with a frying pan. You won't know how to do any of those things until you do this first hard thing. Learn what they are, really and deeply. Learn where the burdens you carry come from, and learn who's carrying burdens so you don't have to. If you learn that you're a princess, learn also what your kingdom cost. Tangled doesn't fail because it doesn't trust kids not to figure out mysteries. It fails because it runs up to the edge of real-world complexity and at the last second pretends things are simple for the sake of a happy ending.
Part 6. Another repatriated-ass baby. Although we had something else on deck, we decided to put out this video this month, November, because in the United States, this is the month in which we observe the holiday that some call Thanksgiving and others call Indigenous Genocide Day. Like all white men, my very white grandmother taught me that we were part Cherokee, but of course we are not. That's just another way for white people to avert their eyes, to try to put themselves on the right side of colonialism. My grandmother still insists, despite a pretty unequivocal DNA test, that she is part Cherokee, but even if some tiny fraction of her DNA was incontrovertibly indigenous, she has no personal, cultural, religious, or social claim on any native identity. Blood quantum isn't what makes someone native. If she were indigenous, there's a pretty real chance that she would not be my grandmother. Because just like white folks now have a habit of pretending to be just a little bit native, white folks back when my dad was born had a habit of pretending that the best place for a native kid to grow up was with a white family. It didn't take much for social workers to decide that native parents were unfit, or that a native kid would have better opportunities with non-native parents, and that really wasn't it best for the child, and isn't that what's important? It happened enough that in 1978, the U.S. Congress passed the Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA, to attempt to preserve native families and, by extension, tribes and cultures. Under ICWA, if a native parent wished to relinquish their parental rights, as in the case of an adoption, the parent would have to do so before a judge, with greater than normal protections, representation, and assistance. An involuntary relinquishment of parental rights was still possible, but in such a case, the native child would not be available for adoption by just anyone. Instead, placement preference would be given first to other members of the child's native family, and then other members of her tribe, and then members of other tribes. If no native adoptive parents could be found, then and only then could a native child be adopted by a non-native family. We mention this here because of baby Veronica, a real-life person, now 12 years old, that found herself at the heart of exactly the dilemma that the first 5 minutes of Tangled inject into this fairy tale. Veronica was never, to my knowledge, a flower, but beyond that minor detail, a great deal of Veronica's story parallels Rapunzel's. Like Rapunzel, Veronica was the child of an indigenous parent. Her father was a member of the Cherokee Nation, and thus so was she. After a messy breakup, and for complex reasons, he agreed to forfeit his parental rights, while Veronica's biological mother was pregnant. He believed that he was releasing the unborn baby to her mother's care. What he did not know was that Veronica's mother was already planning to give her up for adoption. The adoptive parents, who were not indigenous, were present at her birth and took baby Veronica home to another state. They're the ones who gave her her name. When her father found out, he took every available action to stop the adoption and bring Veronica home. His intention had been to give Veronica to her mother, not to strangers. So he went to the courts, using ICWA to argue that he should have the right to be his daughter's father. The resulting case, absurdly named Adoptive Couple versus Baby Girl, took 4 years to make its way through the court system. For the first 2 years of her life, Veronica lived with her adoptive family. In 2011, the South Carolina Supreme Court awarded custody to her father under ICWA, and for the next 2 years, she lived with him. In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that ICWA did not apply to Veronica and her father, given that he had never had physical or legal custody of her prior to relinquishing his rights. And so she went back to her adoptive family, and that's where she remains. Technically, Veronica's Cherokee father had additional legal options after the Supreme Court's decision, but in late 2013, he decided not to pursue any further action, citing the tremendous pain the case, the uncertainty, and the media circus that surrounded both had brought them all. Veronica is a real person, and we have no knowledge and offer no judgment of her, her birth parents, or her adoptive parents. What we see in this story is a complex, heartbreaking, impossible situation caused by the intersection of one child, two loving families, and the centuries of injustice wrought by colonialism. From where we sit, there was never an easy path for Veronica. No way for her life not to be haunted by trauma that she did not earn. Two families fought as hard as they could to protect their daughter, both believing they were doing the right thing, both believing they knew best. Veronica had the misfortune to be born under the shadow of colonialism, and because of that, she was born into conflict. Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Do we root for the indigenous father whose daughter was one in a long chain of babies whisked away from native families by the uncaring courts of the colonizers? Do we root for the adoptive parents who wanted nothing more than to love a child who needed a home? Do we need villains here? What purpose would it even serve to label anyone a villain other than to alleviate our own guilt, to clean up the story, make it more digestible, less troubling? Do we not owe Veronica and Kid Nuke and Baby Nuke and all children and each other the more complex truth that is prerequisite to peace? Rapunzel is not a real person. She is a magic flower that becomes a cartoon girl. She was voiced by Mandy Moore, a perfectly normal human. We have a friend who chatted with Moore at a wedding once and reports that she seemed cool but did not have magic hair. The stakes of this argument about a cartoon are not high, but perhaps the greatest of all pedagogical fallacies is the notion that a person learns only the particular thing he is studying at the time. When we skip the first 5 minutes of Tangled, we avert our eyes from the complexity of Gothel's story, the injustice of the king's actions, and especially the harm that this theft does to all parties. As soon as Corona's soldiers stepped into Gothel's forest, there was never an easy path for Flower. No way for her life not to be haunted by trauma that she did not earn. Two families fought as hard as they could to protect their daughter, both believing they were doing the right thing, both believing they knew best. Rapunzel had the misfortune to be born under the shadow of colonialism. Because of that, she was born into conflict. And when the movie has Gothel declare herself the bad guy, it too averts its eyes from the knotted snarl of colonialism, the mess that even Disney magic could not untangle.
This video was made on the ancestral and traditional lands of the Tachiyokit in Central California. In 1851, the local tribes were forced by the United States Army to sign treaties that exchanged their right to their lands for reservation. Our local land was included in a treaty that was not ratified by Congress in order to remain secret. The state of California later bought this land from the Yokits for $1.25 an acre in 1944. Neither Mom Nuke nor I learned any of this at any point in our schooling. To learn more about the Tachiyokit, visit the link in the video description. If you want to start learning more about whose land you're living on, visit native-land.ca. We first heard about the baby Veronica case on Radiolab. We'll leave a link in their description to their extensive research.
If you enjoyed this video, if it made you think, or if you have other reasons to want to spite CJ the X, leave a like and a comment. If you want more of whatever this has been, subscribe to our channel. If you want to support the channel, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/thenukes. YouTube will never be our full-time job, but the Patreon will help us be able to buy better equipment, like replacing my lav mic with something that will allow better freedom for acrobatics, or replacing my brain with something that will remember how many days there are in November before I'm frantically attempting an any % run of Premiere Pro before I have to pick up Baby Nuke. Finally, please remember that no matter what Mom Nuke says, I am in fact graceful and svelte.
Part 14, Miraculous, Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir.